we get to start with a little coffee for my throat and from my morning and your morning. Good morning. It's time for a new adventure. Today is a unique day for my lovely 5D mystics. I think you know about tomorrow. And those of you who have been on this lovely journey for a while, I'm sure you are very well aware of where the collective is. And I know that some people think of this chit chat as gibberish. It's okay, we'll get to the inner growth stuff as well. But I did want to share a unique message for my lovely intuitives in the 5D spectrum, 5 dimension. So you're in that oneness consciousness, which means you're unconsciously loving people who are secure attachment people, functional adults. So that means you do know about ego and self, and it's not a bad word. And actually, that's the whole point. Can't be oneness consciousness if your body, you're feminine, and you're masculine, your brain, and this is that embodied brain and body. So from the somatics perspective, you can't be oneness if you don't have harmony, and harmony comes with a restorative embodied self. But before someone can get to this spectrum, for those who have dysregulated or modulated, there's a series of aspects that they could look at if they were interested in being a human. And why is this a message that I'm sharing? Because a lot of people in this 4 dimension, they don't think they're in the 4 dimension, which it's not, again, a bad word, nor is 3 dimension. This is for, again, my mystics who know these words, esoterics and metaphysics. This is the spiritual component. So 3D, 4D, it's a mindset, and it's more than just that, though. When I am around people with that type of mindset, there's a couple of aspects that want to be considered. For my 4Ds, the dimension, the dreams, the channeling, the getting lost in the spectrum of the lands from where you come from, or the past, or the present, or the future, those lives. It's not about them not being real. It's about not getting lost in them. And it's about actually noticing how your energy levels, meaning you, the person who wakes up in the morning, is feeling. So if there's anything that I learned and practiced as I moved into more of my clairs, was that, how am I feeling? Am I feeling good? Am I with energy? Am I sleeping well? These seem simple and silly, but they're not. I see people who have the types of dreams that I have. I woke up from one today. It was really interesting. I went back to, I don't know, some queen time. So, for example, and it had a dog and it had a bunch of things happening. I woke up though, I'm nice and rested. And here's where, because of the energies around, I know this is part of the collective. I don't get lost in it. And the people that I have seen who do, they're doing some groups of people a service in some ways, but they're doing themselves a disservice because they're not moving beyond that. They call it a bandwidth. It's not a bandwidth. It's people who are actually thinking that what they're experiencing is a truth of sort versus treating it for what it is. It's a dream. It's a perspective. It's a channeling. It's something, but it isn't part of what you get to do in your mundane. What is a part of your mundane is, again, that aspect of the body and the mind. So again, nothing against people who channel specifically in a certain way, but my idea, when I'm seeing the day-to-day person, not the ones who are leading people, the ones who are following them, I don't see them gaining benefits in their day-to-day life because they're not focusing on their body and mind's well-being. Furthermore, as I've recently learned from the Patrick McNamara videos on the well, or the big think on demonic something and the brain, it's actually very important if someone's having nightmares to be aware of getting support if they keep moving forward. So it's not because what our history shared with us is untrue. It's because our science that has caught up to our past, meaning that technology can now help us to understand how the mind works. And so it can support a person who wants to be a person and be in their well-being. And well-being is how you live your relationships. So this is for my community of 5D mystics who may be wanting to move more over here than over there, because your clairs don't stop being a part of your day-to-day. And oh, by the way, there are very many grounded ones. I love my 5D tarot readers, my 5D channelers. I see them. They're very practical. They talk about personal development. They talk about somatic, sensory-motor, trauma therapy. They talk about integrating your day-to-day, and they also keep people grounded so they're not out there with conspiracies or with other types of, the karmic battle of, light and dark. They're not doing that. That creates not only this us versus them, but again, it doesn't help you to move into an expanded version of your own consciousness, because this dimension stuff, consciousness is your primary and secondary, but the primary is your physiological, biological. It's then those needs, drinking, breathing, stuff like that. The secondary is where we can think that we think. We know that we live, we know that we die as human beings. It's the human condition when you just keep it basic. And most people, they don't find meaning in their own life just because they're breathing. And this is where those drives for the agent of themselves, yes, which is where the Enlightenment soul age group person is in. For those who need to have meaning by belonging, no, they need someone in order or a group to have purpose. That means their drive is only if I can serve another will I be able to feel. Then there's certainty. So some need others to feel secure, and that's their drive. And so, again, if you get to know who you are, the human you, then you get to move into, okay, so my drives are X, Y, Z, D, F, G. You create not a label for yourself, which is what, again, those individuals in other soul age groups, for example, and 3D, 4D, I see them labeling themselves. I see them coming into groups, separating. And that's not oneness consciousness. It's not unconditionally loving each other. It's not even allowing each other to talk about different conversations. But before people can actually have conversations, they need to have a not sensitive ego, which leads me back to those lovely functional adults. The secure attachment with a functional adult, which would indicate a person who's a differentiated self, who has an integrated mind, as I've been learning about that integrated mind with Daniel Siegel in my inner neurobiology course. And that is where the science is showing that an integrated mind is the mind of those who have health. And so this month is dedicated to mental health. Anyone who's yelling at another human being and or creating segments and fractions and sides and silencing is not caring about mental health. They're caring about their side of the journey, but they're not caring about the overall health of the mind of all humans. And that, to me, indicates you don't actually care about the topic. If you care about the mind and you care about the health of the mind of people, then you would learn how not to segment and yell at each other, because yelling creates an unsafe environment. And therefore, most people, do you know, they don't have conversations because they're actually confrontational avoidant or avoidant confrontation, something like that. Like, this is the number one reason people have ruptures in their relationships. And I was a teenager and I didn't have an issue with confrontation, and now I'm an adult and I still don't have an issue with confrontation. But what I did learn, and what I keep on learning, is that most people don't know how to speak their truth because they actually don't take ownership of their flaws and imperfections. They don't take ownership of who they are. When I began my journey with clairs, I wasn't ashamed of it. And I didn't expect people to believe it. And I still don't expect people to believe it. You know how many times I've had people say, I don't believe in Reiki. I don't believe in reconnective healing. Or how about the ones who are defining us as demonic because their textbooks have decided that they only can give the seal of approval to energy. Apparently, groups of people seriously have no idea of what year it is. This is all I can say. It is 2023, and the fifth dimension that I learned about, I'm now seeing what it is, and I'm so happy. I'm so excited. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I was wondering what it would look like. And what it looks like is a lot of great educators that are making great information accessible. I get to learn about it. I get to share it with you. And I get to bring together the human, spiritual, and spirituality elements so that you can become your infinite higher human consciousness potential person, which means a secure attachment person, which means a truly confident person, which means that even if you're talking to your quote-unquote worst enemy, which we don't have any, we would respect them because they have an opinion. and we have an opinion. And the reality is none of us and our opinions really matter. What matters, how are we going to support to structure society? How are we going to support to get things done, to think of the health of people? Again, health of people does not indicate yelling and looking like big, gigantic, humongous men or women who are like, I don't know. I mean, every time I see those people, I think of dictators. And I know how much all these groups say, oh, we don't want any of that. And yet they're called to be watching people like that. And I just recently watched one of my favorite political science dudes. He's my colleague because that's my major. And I loved seeing what he had to share. This is always the big think or the big well or the well, I forget, and I forget his name, but I bought his book and I can't wait to read it. And I can't wait to see this thing happen. So as he's speaking about why people, society, humans, go on pick big, humongous, or just these dictator type, he's bringing into the mix our evolutionary science, which I had learned already from my trauma experts about us and wanting to be protected. I'm like, yeah, that's right. So when I see these big, humongous type people, yeah, they're not my pick for sure, because I can already tell that they think that they are the better version of us, like they're grandiosity. Like, so immediately if I notice that you might be grandiosity, you ain't the leader that I'm going to want, because your ego is so big that you think you're better than other people, which means you're not doing what you do for people. When people yell at each other, they're not doing what they're doing for people. They're doing what they're doing for a personal motive, agenda, something. It doesn't even have to be anything major, but what indicates that you have not matured is that you're in a charged state without recognizing it. When I get passionate, I re-record and re-record and re-record my episodes because I know that my passion comes from a charged state, which is an immature emotional response, which means that my brain is going to be honing in, because that's what happens when we get too passionate, too temperamental. Your brain is actually, there's chemistry that takes place, which is why we all are dumbed down when we get into too much. And I actually can acknowledge it. I acknowledged it again as a teenager. If you have oneness consciousness, you're aware of your feminine, your body, and your masculine, your mind, and you will choose, how do I want to present myself? How do I want to present a conversation? Am I interested in creating a conversation, or am I interested in proving who I am? So if you're interested in proving who you are, you obviously don't know that you can be who you are in the absence of the thumbs up of people. And that's where the difference here is. Your drive is not just because you from your heart feel that to be a truth, something you care for. It is because you have something to prove. Having something to prove about oneself indicates that an individual doesn't have their own self-confidence consistently there yet. Once you're consistently confident, you learn how to consistently grow equanimity, which means you keep yourself in check so that you may be a polite human being, so that you may address, and again, if you care, it's not because you're trying to prove, you're trying to expand. The 5D C person in the Enlightenment Soul Age group and any Enlightenment Soul Age group person is actually looking to expand human consciousness because we want to help humanity as a whole. So for me, mental health of all humanity is important. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to choose a side or use different words to express what I have to say. No, I'm going to use all the words I want to say, and then I'm going to try my best to explain why I want to use them, and to be respectful, and to also apologize, of course, if someone takes offense, but I won't be saying you're right. I will say I understand that you and I speak a different language, and that perhaps you might not want to tune into my channel anymore, because I can share a thought and you can share a thought. And at the end of the day, it's air that we're using. Let's use it well. As for what happens in the planet and on this earth, I mean, up till recently, we still get to vote. So there are things we can do. It's not by yelling that things get done, although some people think it is. But again, they kind of live in the past. That's my opinion personally. That's not about being right or wrong. I do know that structures will continue to exist. Oh, and here's the fun fact. Because people and their egos, when they are in grandiosity, they literally are blinded by the idea that they are perfect. They won't ever consider themselves in any kind of circumstance. And I'm being vague on purpose, but I immediately was like, that thing that this guy's suggesting, that's going to be awesome. I can't wait for it to happen. Because you better bet that most people don't think of themselves in certain ways. And I know that smart educators are smart for a reason. They're stable, they're mature, they're adaptive, they're rational, and they're teachable, which means they're always learning. And learning, it's the most amazing. I'm so happy I went to college, and I'm so happy that they still exist. And I'm so happy that people who don't want college to be there are not the ones who are leading anywhere, because that would be really, really sad, to go back to the medieval times and have ignorance. We already have ignorance right now because people don't actually contemplate what they're speaking from their mouths. But that's because they don't actually become aware of themselves, because just recently we've began to understand about true mental health and what trauma is. And it's because technology was able to see inside the body of humanity. And then these lovely educators and researchers cared enough to keep doing research to support us. And so when you actually look at the community, the same people who are leading the way to the new information say the past didn't do a service to humanity. There are certain types of mental health groups, if you will, that have not led people to well-being, but they were ignorant. They didn't know. And here's why I always am very sad to see people being angry and calling people out for something that they think was strategized, because that's malicious thinking on the end of the people. As somebody who learned about how many new things we learned in time, when I look back, I'm like, well, of course, they didn't know about the nervous system and the 3 ways it responds. They didn't know about how the brain worked. They didn't have the technology. They were doing the best they could with the tools they had, which was their eyes. The reason people are always looking at conspiracy is because they don't trust their own species. Humanity is our species. I trust my species. What I see is ignorance, but what I also see is people trying to do the best. Now you get to choose. We all get to choose what to believe in. I don't believe in evil because when I've seen it, it's most of the time, if not actually 100% plus of the time, a human being who has unresolved trauma or some type of situation going down. And they're actually not thinking clearly. They're reactive. And in fact, because I'm not reactive, since I don't fear a person who's getting pissy or who's getting into any type of modality, gaslighting, manipulating, all these words, people, my entire life, I was a teenager. Again, I'm like, if you're telling me you know what they're doing, then they're not doing it. And they'd get all, again, upset. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if I can see it, I'll present it to you. Now, I did learn that presenting it doesn't matter. And that's because those same people don't have access to their implicit memory stuff. What does that mean? It means they're not noticing what they're doing. And even if they do notice, they're not going to speak the truth. Like, there's just so many areas, but they don't know that their pattern and their behavior stems from a safety behavior that is because of a reason. Because again, they don't trust humanity, so they don't even trust themselves. There's this rumination cycle. The shame cycle is inner critic, outer critic, then denying and withdrawing. Denying is done by patterns of behavior. It can be using your time with things you don't care about. It can be doing drugs, sex, food. There's many ways they describe this denial. I've seen people deny it by forgetting things they've said to me. And I'm like, wow, okay. But I'm smart enough to recognize how not to say anything because I've done it. And you know what happens when I've done it? No, you're just now making up stuff. It's like, okay, no, I didn't make it up, but okay. Thank you, Stephen Porges, for sharing with me that the ears of people are turned off when they're in their self-preservation mode. It's physiological. And I learned, okay, now this is starting to make sense. So your hippocampus, all of the way that you actually take in information is distorted. The people who are not in the self-preservation mode, we hear and we will remember, but we don't want to go and battle egos because, again, that means to me that you're not yet mature and not everybody is ready to be their functional adult. Not everybody is ready to be in their restorative embodied self because they haven't allowed their own healing to take place. Because when the opportunities arise through your exchanges, through your relationships, through the system, through everything, what I see is people keep choosing fear. They keep choosing the shame cycle, which, by the way, evolutionary science shows why we had it. It's because way back when we had to work together. So we would follow the big person because they're strong out, and we would follow the crowd, in fact, disregarding our own instincts because the crowd would keep us safe. We're not living in our ancestral times. Some of us actually recognized it and grew up to be this enlightenment soul age people, functional adults, knowing how to work with our own emotions and thoughts all in one. And here's the other part: we don't actually get tricked by our feelings because we are paying attention. So if I'm getting pissy or I'm getting happy, I know what that means. I know how to identify if I have bias. In fact, I tease about my bias all the time. And I know when I need to pay more attention. And I trust that my group, my society, keeps me in quote unquote check, like we all will, of, oh, hey, by the way, here, learn these words or learn this or do that because this is what you want to present in this scenario. We're co-creating always together if we hear each other and if we take each other's thoughts and opinions in a way that we care, but obviously it's because people care about you. So I will listen to the people who care about me because I know they will try to lead me to make sense in a world that has certain types of things that I don't actually know how to follow, because all I see is love and all I see is people trying. And so I'm usually the person who's like, it's okay. And so my loved ones will be like, no, you need to learn how some things aren't okay. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I find another sweet spot. We find sweet spots, 5DC person, of how to be able and speak the language of love, the functional adult way, because true love is an unconditional love anyways. And really what it is you and your social engagement system with an integrated mind, not a rigid mind. Rigidity is not a healthy mind. Flexibility, adaptability, coherence, energized, stable is a healthy mind. Thank you, Daniel Siegel. So looking forward to hearing from you, thoughts and more. Have a great day.